Welcome back to part two of the Radio Legends interview with my guest today. Here is broadcasting icon Johnny Gould. So 3 more questions, if that's okay, Johnny.
I'm ready, Ben. I don't know about icon, but it's a thrill to be on your podcast. Maybe I can become one today, courtesy of you. We'll see.
That's good. I've had people like Neil Fox on. I've never had Chris Tarrant yet.
Right. Well, you've had a very good lineup on the podcasts. I tell everyone, I think, to look at your series both on YouTube and on podcasts, because you've had a really impressive lineup of presenters over the years.
I've also had as well some of my heroes, and I also had David Lloyd, a load of other people as well. I've even had the legendary Tony Prince from Luxembourg.
Excellent. Well done. Very good.
Thank you. Now we'll get on with your career. Question 4, what is your greatest achievement in your career so far?
Oh, I've had so many highs. I think I'd like to measure that by the people that I've been privileged to work with. And predominantly in my career, I was a sports presenter. And so I was able to walk into studios and work with the main presenter face to face. And among the greatest broadcasters that I've worked with are Simon Bates, who I worked with for 2 years at Smooth Radio and 2 years at the old Talk Radio. He sets very high bars of his co-presenters and his team, and I benefited from that. Simon Bates is a brilliant broadcaster and should still be on air if he wants to be. Going back a little bit, Robbie Vincent, I worked with for 5 years at LBC, brilliant presenter, brilliant phone show host. He's now at Jazz FM. He's got a massive record collection. What he doesn't know about jazz and soul and funk ain't worth knowing. He's a brilliant guy and again, a very exacting, talented presenter.
Mr. Ferrari.
I mean, I've worked with so many. I mean, going back to the BBC World Service 30 years ago, I've worked with Pamela Crichton, who's an absolute home service legend. It feels like handing over the baton from a bygone age. She's still with us. I think she's in her 90s, Pamela Crichton. Beautiful lady with a beautiful BBC World Service voice. Beautiful. And who else? Robin Lustig. And I replaced Paddy Feeney on Sports World. Paddy Feeney is a home service legend. This is before Radio 2. I worked with Zoe Ball on The Breakfast Show at Radio 2. I think that's a lovely highlight. I spent 2 weeks on the Radio 2 Breakfast Show after I left Smooth Radio. I wanted to stay longer, but I have one thing in common with Steve Wright. I was overlooked by Helen What's-Her-Face, the Radio 2 paper shuffler, the manager who takes a delight in taking orders from above. So I loved my time at Radio 2. I worked with Bobby Pryor, and I saw the wonderful Alan Deep voice, the lottery man. He was he read the news there, Alan Dedicoat. Alan left soon after. Again, a wonderful voice. Great broadcaster, Alan Dedicoat, beautiful voice. And he's from Birmingham as well. Can't knock that. And who else? I had a chance to work briefly with Michael Ball because he stood in for Ken Bruce at that time. Angela Rippon. Oh man, I mean, I'm going to regret not mentioning people when this Zoom call is finished, because I think these highlights are my highlights, but I think probably it's the people that I've worked with over the years. Andrew Neil at LBC.
Mr. Ferrari.
Nigel Farage at GB News recently. That was a nice moment. And of course, I got to mention, he's TV mainly, but I worked with him at Talk Radio as a presenter. That's the great Eamon Holmes, who has been an inspiration and a friend of mine for 30 years. Very nice man, very good man.
Did you ever work with Mr. Nick Ferrari then?
Yeah, I did the maddest thing with Nick Ferrari. His producer phoned me up when he was doing the LBC Breakfast Show, which of course he's still doing. And he said, you know the Diana Fountain in Hyde Park? Well, go down there and commentate on the paper boats that we're going to give you. And we're going to have a Grand National of paper boats. and it's going to be Richard and Judy in one, Prince Charles in another, I think Theresa May in another, and I had to commentate on these paper boats going down the stream of the fountain. Now, of course, this was the theatre of radio, so there was no video of this. And these paper boats got immersed in water and sunk. None of them finished. So I had to pretend that one of the paper boats won, and I elected that it should be Richard and Judy. So that is my moment with Nick Ferrari.
Have you got a moment with Steve Allen?
Yeah, I've worked with Steve as well. When I did sport at LBC, I worked with every single one of them. Clive Bull, the late Mike Allen, the late Mike Dickin.
Did you work with Ian
Robbie
Collins or Mr. Whale at LBC?
No, with Ian and James, I was always at Talk Radio.
Because I know that they worked for LBC for a while.
They did. I was at LBC before those guys. And I left LBC in about 92 and actually never came back.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And now we'll move on to question 5. What moment will you never forget on the radio wireless?
That is a phenomenal question. I don't know how rude I can be. So I'm going to slightly substitute the words. I was responsible for the sports news on Talk Radio in the first incarnation in the 90s. And one of my presenters walked into the control room and said to the producer, "Do you mind if I say a certain agent is 2 very rude words?"
No, I don't.
And the producer said, "Yeah, I don't see why not." What the producer thought my sports broadcaster was saying was, "Do you mind if I make an opinion piece about the credibility of this agent? Like, what's he doing?" And so the producer said, yeah, you can go on and do that. So my sports reporter went into the studio and said, "I tell you what, I'm really fuming about that sports agent. I'm not going to mention the name. I think and he said exactly those 2 swear words on air. And the producer held his head like this. And he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "You told me I could say that." And he said, "Yes, not literally on air. You can't swear on air. I thought you meant I wanted to editorialize the bulletin and call him, I don't know, a fool or someone who doesn't understand or something like that." And I must say, that was a hilarious moment. And incredibly, I kept the contract going. And I even kept that guy in his job.
Yeah. How well do you know Mr. Morgan then?
I've exchanged emails with Piers. I actually don't know him that well, but I think he's a great broadcaster.
Not as
He's
well as
very skilled journalist, very skilled, understands the mood of the country. You may not always agree with him.
Not as well as you don't know him as well as Mr. Graham and Mr. Kyle then.
I know I've come to know Jeremy more recently, and I've known Mike for a few years. Obviously, when Mike was with Mike Parry, and I hand over to Mike every Saturday night at the moment on the Talk Away.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've come to know Mike, but yes, I don't know Piers as well as Mike.
Yeah, because as I say, yeah, that's good. And I liked your comments on the France thing a few months ago when you were in for Mr. Whale.
About the Paris Saint-Germain, the European Cup final.
Yeah, I agreed with your comment.
Wasn't it? Yeah, infuriating what happened to the Liverpool fans.
Yeah, and it's brilliant that what you do as well. So well done. And my last question on the list. Yeah, you were saying thank you. Sorry. My last question on the list is: what advice would you give to young aspiring broadcasters who are starting out at the bottom of the ladder?
It's one simple thing, which is never, ever give up. if you really believe that you can turn a buck in this industry and that you can compete and that you're good, you just have to keep going. And I must tell you, Ben, that challenge never stops. You know, people are in the industry for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, like I've been 35 in my case. But establishing yourself never stops. And so that hunger to be a broadcaster exists in everyone who's on air. Because if you don't have that hunger, you shouldn't be on it. So I'd say to any youngster, keep at it if you really believe in it. And if you don't believe in it, do something else.
Brilliant. And I'm also hoping to, he's never been interviewed before. I'm hoping to get your brother on this podcast.
Well, shall I send him a text message?
Yeah, because I've had his other brother from his radio brother, Mr. Whale, as well.
Well, in which case, I'll drop him a note, Ben. I'll tell you what I'll do. When you finish this podcast, I'll send it him.
Yeah.
And then you can get in touch with him and I'll show him what we did.
That's it for today. Thank you for joining me, Johnny.
It's my pleasure, Ben.
Yeah, it has been a pleasure. Thank you to all you guys out there for joining me too. We are almost out of time for today. So please give it up one more time for Mr. Johnny Gould. Thank you very much for watching. This will be available on my YouTube channel for what video form and my wix.com website for audio form, and maybe one day on a radio station near you. Thanks very much. And but until next time, that's a wrap. And back to the studio. But do stay there for the photo, Johnny. And that's a wrap. And back to the studio.